Welcome to John Martin Talks, where we battle ignorance and apathy daily. The growing ignorance of just how special this experiment we call the United States of America is, and the apathy that we can't or won't do anything and everything to save her. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we got a great show for you today. We're going to start out with a topic about how the coronavirus conquered America, how we got to the point that we're at right now, and kind of where do we go from here. Of course, it's hard to do a show nowadays that isn't all corona. I looked for a bunch of different articles to talk to you about, and I can't hardly find one that isn't coronavirus related. So today is no exception. We also are going to talk about the Wisconsin primary. It is going on literally as we speak this morning. And we'll obviously bring you the results of that tomorrow. But there were some major court decisions that could impact the 2020 election moving forward. It went all the way up to the Supreme Court. So we're going to talk to you about that. And then, sadly, our pets are being affected by the coronavirus. And I'm not talking about catching it, although there's some evidence that some animals can actually get the coronavirus. And we'll talk a little bit about that. But mainly I'm talking about the care for the animals, the idea that what the veterinarians are going through and pet owners. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. But we start out today with an AFP story, how coronavirus conquered America and ways to fight back. If you're new to our show, let me kind of just briefly explain our format here. Basically, I pick 2 or 3 news stories, and I try to discuss them, break them down for you for a couple of things. One, I try to pick something that's relevant. Generally, I try to pick something that you may or may not have on your radar screen, but you need to. And I try to present articles that you might be interested in, that I'm certainly interested in. And I put my spin on them. So that's kind of the format that we have here at John Martin Talks. And my goal is to be seriously entertaining. I try to put a little old country cracker logic, as they say, on that. I look at myself as a little bit Mark Twain, a little bit John Wayne, and a little bit Duck Dynasty. So if you're looking for political correctness, you're in the wrong place. But if you're looking for some old-time Southern wisdom that is probably going to die away, it certainly is on a steady basis, but going when my generation goes, then and I want to impart that upon you, the importance of that. And I do believe there is a significant knowledge that we're on the verge of losing. So those are kind of the parameters I take for doing my show. And I want to welcome, we're getting more and more listeners every day, and I greatly appreciate it. So let's get on with this article. Washington, AFP, early complacency, testing failures, and the lack of a nationwide response allowed the coronavirus to explode in the U.S., which has by far the highest number of confirmed cases in the world. That's an interesting that we have the highest number of confirmed cases. I don't know that that's actually true. When I say that it's not true, I'm not saying that we don't have the highest number of publicized confirmed casings, but I suspect that China still has more virus cases than we know of. I don't trust much coming out of China. And there's not a whole lot, to be honest with you, coming out of Africa at all. Now, it could potentially be that the reason there are not a lot of cases in Africa, certainly is there's very little, if any, testing going on there. And we know that the continent of Africa, to a certain extent, is in a political shambles. But there's also some evidence that, Africa has probably the number one malaria deaths in the world. And so Africa, over the last few decades, and led to a certain extent by Mr. Bill Gates and his foundation, have been receiving treatments, many of the treatments that President Trump has been espousing on that treat malaria, that can be used to potentially treat the coronavirus. So it could be that fact that they have so much of this malaria treatment could actually be curtailing the infection rate in Africa. I suspect it's a combination of those factors. But anyway, I'm not going to deny that we have the most cases, but I would say a little caveat, it's probably the most publicized cases because we are a wee bit more honest than some areas are. But as far as this complacency deal, let me just say that I agree that we've been complacent. And I'm not necessarily talking about any one individual, not necessarily talking about President Trump. We as a nation have been complacent, not as much in dealing with this current pandemic, but being prepared for the inevitable pandemic that was and still may be coming our way. I mean, this may be mild to what we face down the road. If you look at the way our society is set up and the world in general and our relation to it, we should have been prepared much better as a nation for the last decade, really, maybe last couple of decades, for this inevitability. Coronavirus and what we're actually facing from it is absolutely and was inevitable, and we may not have seen the worst yet. So I do think there is a case to be made that we have been complacent about this in general. But Donald Trump, I will say, I do believe that he acted or reacted as quickly as he realistically could have. If you think about it from a political sense, Donald Trump called hell just shutting down the borders to incoming Chinese flights. And he was called everything, but a child of God for that. If he'd have done it, say, a month earlier, when the first viruses started popping on the national news or international news, he would have they'd have been calling for his impeachment over that, and they may still be. With the number of people known to be infected closing in on 350,000 and more than 10,000 deaths, this is in the United States, here is a guide to what we need to know so far and what might happen next. So they're going to outline how we got here, what we could do next. But before we get to that, I want to bring a little perspective to this. Now, I'm not saying I'm not a medical person, but and I don't play one on TV, but I got a little bit of sense in this head. It shakes around a little bit, but I got to put a little context into this. And I'm not saying it's an apples to apples comparison, but as far as preventable deaths, let's put it this way, preventable deaths, because we're going to die. People dying, dropping dead every day. But the number one cause of death in America by a long shot is heart disease. And the deal is much of heart disease could be prevented by us individually and us collectively as a nation. Let me just give you a few statistics to kind of put this idea that, let me get back here, that we have 350 known cases in the United States and 10,000 deaths. Let me read these statistics. They're a bit sobering. Heart disease is the leading cause of death for men and women and people of most racial and ethnic groups in the United States. One person dies every 37 seconds in the United States from cardiovascular disease. About 647,000 Americans die from heart disease each year. 647,000. That's 1 in every 4 deaths that occur in the United States of America are from heart disease. And here's really this, and I need to look at this, and I have been myself. Lifestyle choices can also put people at higher risk for heart disease, including diabetes. Most of the diabetes cases in the United States are self-inflicted because basically we got fat man's disease. Overweight and obesity leads to diabetes. Unhealthy diet. We're not eating the right food. How many of us, think about this, how many people right now are sitting at home and are more likely to die from all the Little Debbie snack cakes they're eating while they're sitting at home than they would be if they were out working? Physical inactivity. I've been consciously trying to do more and more every day. Excessive alcohol use leads to heart disease. So we know the liquor stores are essential, right? And they're open. My point being, not that we shouldn't take the coronavirus seriously. We absolutely should. But the fact that people are dying on a daily basis from something that is very preventable for most people. Now, some of it is genetic, heart disease I'm talking about. But by and large, the number one killer in America, which is heart disease, most of it, at least 90%, probably much higher, is absolutely preventable. and we're not in a panic over that. Perhaps we actually should be. But let's get on with the article. It says complacency is one of the topics that they're saying here. At the start of the outbreak, President Donald Trump scoffed at the idea that sustained spread was inevitable even after senior government scientists said it was. Suggested the disease, here talking about Trump, may disappear, and this is their words, miraculously by April. Now let me defend the president a little bit on this. Donald Trump never ever said that the disease was going to be gone by April. He never ever said that. He said he hoped that we could get past it by April and that maybe we could have the symbolism of Easter Sunday, which I guess is next Sunday, be symbolic in that we're past this. We've overcome it. He was giving us hope. He never once said that it was going to be the end of this viral threat to our nation. Never one time. The mainstream media would make you think that Donald Trump pronounced that, oh, we'll be past this come Easter. He never said that. Now, what is the president supposed to do? Is he supposed to just show up at these press conferences and go, we're all going to die? And we are someday, and many of us from preventable heart disease. The president's words were echoed, back to the article, were echoed across the right-wing media. Yeah, the right-wing media is the only one that hyped this stuff. And where pundits amplified the idea that the threat was seriously overblown. It's amazing that they would even put that in this article. The left wing, now I'm not absolving right wing if you want to, but the media in general, but the left wing led the way down playing there. I mean, I could play you a montage. I'm sure you've seen them if you've been watching Fox News at all, that there's a montage of left-wing political hacks basically going, oh, this thing is overblown. There's no big deal. We're not China, and to even call it the China virus is prejudice. Think about that. The media spent more time asking Donald Trump about calling it the Chinese virus, the Wuhan flu or whatever, than they did on anything else. I mean, it's just crazy how they responded. But it says here, they're quoting Sean Hannity here. And this is a true quote, because I've been watching Mr. Hannity, but it's taken a bit out of context, as imagine that. But their report here that Sean Hannity said, I see it again as like it's bludgeoned Trump with this new hoax. And he said that on March 9th. Now, he did say that, but what he was talking about was not that the virus was a hoax, but the blame Trump was a hoax, that somehow that the threat to the United States, if there is one, is because of Donald Trump. That's the hoax he was talking about. He was talking about the mainstream media's coverage of it and the Democrats, progressives, one and the same actually, trying to pound Trump on this. That was the hoax he was talking about. But let me just show you this meme, and it's accurate. I looked at it. It's kind of the coronavirus timeline. I've posted this up on my Facebook site as well, so you can check it out. Go directly to John Martin Talks Facebook page, like it, share it with others. You'll see it there. But look at this. January 31st, Trump bans flights from China. So Donald Trump, literally a month after the first announcements were coming that there was potentially a problem with coronavirus in China, banned flights from China. What happened when he did that? Look at this. February 5th, Senator Schumer and the Democrats have a meltdown, true, saying that China travel ban is part of Trump's war against immigrants. So they were essentially saying that Donald Trump was xenophobic, he was picking on the Chinese, and he was using this to close the borders of America down. Now, what has happened since then? Every country in the world now is closing their borders. Donald Trump, like many, if not everything he said, has been right all along. Pelosi, they're talking about these leaders. Look at that, February 24th. Now, this is almost a month after President Trump closed China flights coming into the United States. Pelosi tells everyone Trump is being racist and everyone should go visit Chinatown in San Francisco in her district. Literally, and I'm not trying to blame all of that on people who are of Chinese descent. That is clearly not the case. It's the communist government of China, not the people of China, let alone the American citizens that are of Chinese descent. But Pelosi is literally saying no big deal. And she was joined by people. Look at this. March 13th, less than a month ago, de Blasio, mayor of New York City, and his health experts, and I have played clips of that, tell New Yorkers, hey, threat is overblown. Excuse me. Go use the subway, go to concerts. Even one of them even said go up and hug Chinese citizens, Chinese people of Chinese descent to show your unity with them. Coronavirus is no big deal. So the president was the first leader to act on this a couple of months ago. And it's the left wing and those political figures on the left that have actually downplayed the disease. To me, it's just unbelievable. As I say, go check it. And think about this. If you've been watching Facebook, you'll notice I've had that posted up for a couple of days now. And the fact checkers of Facebook haven't taken it down or haven't put that screen over it because guess what? It's truth. It's the truth. All right. The next thing they talk about here in this is test. And this is where I have some agreement. We have not been testing enough. We were ill prepared for it as a nation, not just President Trump, but you could make a case that he should have been more on top of this. But now we are leading the world in testing, which they don't mention in this, of course, because it doesn't fit the narrative. As the illness took root initially in the West Coast, states of Washington and California, the U.S. was unable to perform meaningful levels of contact tracing because it was so slow off the mark with testing. Now, I agree with this. We should have been testing more rapidly and more succinctly. But it was part, as I say, of the overall lack of preparation we've been having to this. One thing about politicians, and I say this goes across the board, they are leery about spending money on stuff that they can't prove to the voters that, hey, we need to do this. So they're going to put their pet projects, they're going to put things that the voters can see up front much more readily than preparedness. And we may need to rethink that. And we may need to, as an American people, need to rethink holding our local county, state, federal governments to accountability on being prepared for this. Because let me just say this to you. I've said it before, but if I say it, of course, it bears repeating. We're not past this at any given moment. We're going to have pandemics of this type. It is just a foregone conclusion with the type of world we live in. And we're not ever going to be able to put the genie back in the bottle totally and isolate ourselves. We are going to be citizens of the world to a certain extent. And I'm not advocating for a one world government. I'm just saying what is the practical reality of the modern world. So we better prepare for it, because this may be a blessing in disguise what's happened here. It could be, as my wife said to me, it could be the good Lord's way of firing a warning shot, so to speak, across our bow to let us know that we better prepare, because this may be worse down the road. And nothing else, whether true or not, we absolutely need to rethink what we're doing. Gabe Killen, director of emergency medicine at Johns Hopkins University, said, if we could have done contact tracing, what they're talking about is testing. They find somebody that's positive, and then they try to trace their exposure and test those people so that the curve is narrowed and it doesn't keep expanding. That's what they're talking. We might have found a lot more cases quickly and shut down the hot spots. I think that is reasonable. But the lack of information coming from Communist China and the World Health Organization, who, you might say, who? Yeah, who? The World Health Organization, which has become clear that, and I got to give credit to Tucker Carlson. He has exposed this pretty much on his show, that the World Health Organization is totally in the pocket of China, Communist China. There's been no doubt. So you combine those two, and we really didn't have the proper information on a timely basis. Because think about it. If they're talking about maybe we should have tested more and locked down quicker, the American people, without clear evidence, would have balked at that. And so there's no doubt about that. But we should have paid more attention to the hot spots, and we probably should now. Everybody's trying to make one size fits all, and we probably need to emphasize more on the hot spots. And this gets into this next part. No national response. Now, these are the article's words, not mine. Compounding the difficulty of responding to a national crisis is the U.S. federal system of governance. So the way we govern is at fault, with the power devolved to 50 states. Now I agree that this needs to be looked at, because when it comes to a pandemic, it's not the same as a hurricane, a wildfire, earthquakes, flooding, those types of things, which tend to be regional and happen to states one at a time, or maybe a handful in a certain region. That is what our system is essentially prepared to do. And it makes sense in the sense that, like, Florida needs to be prepared for hurricanes. They don't really have to worry too much about earthquakes. So our preparedness in Florida and the preparedness in California are going to be vastly different based on what our states experience. So there is some common sense in this. But we rarely, if ever, have a national disaster in that sense. There's not an earthquake that affects the entire country. There's not a hurricane that affects the entire country. It could affect the entire eastern seaboard and, of course, the Gulf states, and those states are prepared, especially those that get hit quite often. Remember, New York was not prepared for Hurricane Sandy at all, even though they are in a hurricane zone and should have been. They were very ill prepared, New Jersey and New York, because they hadn't had a direct hit in quite some time. Florida has been prepared very well, especially under the last several governors we've had. So we need to take a look at this nationally, even now and after this, as we're thinking about how to prepare for pandemics, which don't really know borders. And the other thing is the U.S. Constitution, see? Because the U.S. Constitution, if you follow it, which we don't, by the way, very often, the states have a big role to play and are essentially independent. Even though we are the United States of America, under our constitutional republic, the states are supposed to have a lot of autonomy, and we're not supposed to, believe it or not, snowflakes, we're not supposed to have this bloated, ever-reaching federal government. Much of what we do on a federal level, I would make the case, is absolutely unconstitutional. But as I say, that genie is out of the bottle and is going to be difficult to put in. So we do have some questions about how we do this. I do think we need to take a look at how we do it and maintain our constitutional republic, which no one seems to be discussing that outside of me. It doesn't seem like sometimes. Anyway, let's move along. 9 states have still not yet ordered total lockdowns, all of them controlled by Republican governors. So these Republicans are acting independent. They're actually being governors of their state. And this says, much to the frustration of public health experts. I'm all for science. I'm all for using public health experts. But at the end of the day, I don't want public health experts making the decisions for our country in general. It is a part of the overall decision. It's just like I don't want the military making all the decisions for our nation. I want us to have civilian control over it. That is a very important factor. But this idea that 7 states, and if you look at it, it's more like 11, because some states are letting the counties within their state do different things. Florida was like that for a while. Of course, we have a shutdown order now. But does this actually matter right now? Does it really matter? I mean, think about it this way. Is there anyone out there? Now, there are individuals going to rebel against all kinds of things, but pretty much the country is going through shutdown procedures. Even in states where you're not legally required to. I guarantee you, because I've heard reports of it and seen it and talked to people out there, the supermarkets that are open in Iowa, for instance, are still doing social distancing and those types of things. So the country is, in effect, having this total shutdown, really. And it says, and here's the other thing. Does each state absolutely have to have the same level of shutdown? I think that's obviously not true. They don't. I mean, there is like, for instance, and I'm not picking on, I'm just saying, in Wyoming or Montana, it's a lot easier to maintain your social distance out there because the towns are isolated for the most part. They're lightly populated in places like, the Dakotas and places like that. It is reasonable to expect them to be different than New York City. And here's the other thing that very few people are talking about. Dr. Fauci, and I said this on the show yesterday, the best way to check out our podcast, by the way, is go directly to John Martin Talks Facebook page, like it and share it with others. You can also go to our YouTube, where we now have our John Martin Talks YouTube channel back up and running and up to date. All of our shows are archived there. You can catch them on America's Voice News Network. They rebroadcast our show. We're doing a late night deal around midnight, I think, and you can get that on your any kind of streaming device like Roku, Fire Stick, Apple TV. Download the app on iPhone and Android. We are broadcasting on Pluto TV, which is a new streaming channel, and we're on Dish Network, so we are literally going out to the stars on channel 219, and of course America's Voice News is archiving our show on their website. But back to this article, something I wanted to mention that I really haven't heard much talk about this, because I said yesterday, Dr. Fauci said that this thing is going to be seasonable. In other words, we're not going to just be over with coronavirus, and it's going to take, by pretty much everybody's estimates, at least a year to actually have a vaccine that is workable, proven, tested, and out to the public. Okay, so that's just a fact. Now, could it be a little bit sooner? Certainly, and I'm hopeful that it will be. But at the end of the day, this virus is going to come back to us like the flu does. It comes back every year, even though we have the flu shot or vaccine. So here's one of my concerns. What about the idea of herd immunity? And if you don't know what I'm talking about, essentially it basically means that if you get infected and you get past it, a certain amount of people that get it and get cured or get through it are going to produce virins or whatever. They're going to have immunity to it. And there is a school of thought that's not getting much publicity at all, that the herd mentality is ultimately the way to go, because what it does is it makes your nation and the people a certain bit immune to it. Now, does that mean that we're going to have 200,000, upwards of 2 million people dead if we totally went that way? Yeah, it could mean that. And what level of deaths is acceptable? Well, none really, but realistically, we accept hundreds of thousands of preventable deaths on a routine basis. And if we're ever going to get past this, at some point, we're going to have the idea of herd immunity. Now, there's another type of herd that I'm worried more about. I'm actually worried more about this than I am the coronavirus, and it's right there. The fact that we're becoming sheep as a nation. And we were doing this way before coronavirus. Coronavirus has exposed it, like Trump derangement syndrome to a certain extent, has exposed the progressive and the mainstream media, the Democrats, for the craziness that they have. This coronavirus is exposing that we've basically just become sheep. And I'm more worried about that and how quickly we were willing to surrender our rights. I'm not saying that the social distancing and the shutting down may or may not have been the right decision. I'm not really even arguing that. But the fact that we literally did not even debate it, we just accepted it as written rule and we're willing to give up so many of our rights, troubles me. Back to the article. Billy Bob tells me to get back to the article. If you're new to the show, you hadn't met, first of all, where you been? Secondly, glad to have you. Some of us are sicker than others, and I probably fall right in that category. This is my psychic sidekick, Billy Bob Bass. He keeps me straight on the show. Got a Twitter handle, by the way. It's at Billy Bob Bass 1, and mine is at John Martin Talks. And if you're wondering, yeah, the toilet paper belongs to Billy Bob, and he's just out there bragging about it. That's why he put that little decoration that a viewer sent me, by the way. Thank you very much. You know who you are. The state of Washington seems to now be on the downward slope of the case curve and even sent 400 ventilators to the hardest hit New York. But Governor Jay Inslee said he feared a second wave because of the ongoing patchwork response. There's likely to be a second wave. As I said, until we develop a combination of a vaccine and a herd immunity, we're going to be dealing with this for a while. But Governor Inslee told NBC, he said, even if Washington gets on top of this fully, if another state doesn't, it can come back and come across our borders. So state borders matter? Wow, man. So if state borders matter, doesn't the federal borders matter? I'm just saying. Borders 2 months from now. So this is important to have a national success. It will come back. There's no question about it. And those of you who worship Dr. Fauci need to understand that he said this is going to be seasonal. Now, let me check my time. Yeah, I'm doing okay. To mask or not to mask is another big topic about wearing masks. Another factor that set apart Asian countries that contained the virus spread better than many of their Western counterparts was their widespread use of surgical face masks. Now, the people, especially in Asian countries and in China in particular, they've been masking themselves for quite some time, long before this coronavirus, this latest COVID-19, which by its very nature is the 19th version. They've been wearing masks a lot. You see pictures of people in China wearing masks, and it's more so now, but it's been a socially acceptable thing for a while. And it's definitely different here. Western experts initially insisted the coverings were not effective at preventing infection. Accordingly, the CDC only recommended that sick people and their caregivers use them. And that's likely still true. I'm going to admit something that's not very politically correct, I'm sure. But before all of this happened, I got to believe there's one or two out there just like me. When you saw someone, and we occasionally see someone wearing a mask in public, before Corona, when you saw that, didn't you socially distance yourself from that person automatically? Didn't you kind of assume that there was something actually wrong with them? Not so much wrong with you and they're worried about you, but wrong with them? I did. I'm just going to tell it like it is. One thing about me, I'm not politically correct. I will tell you what I honestly think. But a growing body of scholarship showing the virus might be transmitted even when people speak or talk, as opposed to cough or sneeze, and up to 25% of infected people are asymptomatic. In other words, they don't show any sign of having it. Made officials change their minds. 25% of infected people are asymptomatic. Think about that, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, not only is it potentially a threat, I get that, but how do you treat these people? Do we isolate them? I mean, at what point are we sacrificing our rights as American citizens for some kind of safety? And there's an old boy, which I'm going to talk about here in a minute, that kind of warned us about that a while back. But let me just say for sure, wearing masks in our society, routinely wearing masks, and I'm not advocating against it. You may see me, I got some in my car. I haven't worn them yet, but I may if I have to start going shopping again. If I'm running out of toilet paper and I'm desperate and I don't care about social distance, I'm going to beat you to the toilet paper, by God. Like Billy Bob might take his paper. I might have to wear a mask for that fight. But it's going to affect us, no doubt. Check out this little meme I came up with. There you go. Summer of 2020, Corona summer. Kind of puts a new emphasis on tan lines, doesn't it? I mean, you have to judge people now. Man, she's something else. But is she Corona worthy? Good case of Corona. I don't know. That one there might be. All right, we'll move along. What's next for the United States of America? While the U.S. has the third highest number of deaths behind Italy and Spain, we're going to talk about that in a minute, is also a far more populous country than both, and the fatality rate remains relatively low. Now, this is not a percentage, let me tell you flat out, but it's interesting. Relatively low at 2.9, so basically 3 people per 100,000 are actually dying from this in the United States right now. In other words, the number of cases versus the number of deaths, 3 per 100,000. Now, how many actually die from coronavirus? This is something not being talked about as well. And I'll give you an example. It's not an apples to apples, but like in Florida, we have a hurricane, and it's not too often we get a lot of deaths from hurricanes because we prepared, things are different. Used to be hundreds would die. Now it's a handful. But quite often you'll hear, oh, there was a fatality, in Orlando. And when you look at it, it turns out a man was out there doing something in the hurricane and he had a heart attack. Well, because the storm was passing over that area, he died from the hurricane, even though it was a heart attack. I'm just saying, there are people right now, the way they're counting, I know in New York this to be a fact. If you test positive for coronavirus and you die, it doesn't matter how you die, it is a coronavirus death. Now, we know for sure that there are people who test positive that are dying from this, and it's not directly related to corona. It doesn't help the situation, I'm sure, but there are people who were going to have a heart attack anyway. Or, or maybe if someone, my understanding is if someone had cancer and then was going to die from it anyway, but got corona and died, they're blaming it on corona. That's what I'm hearing anyway. So how many the statistics? The White House has officially projected between 100,000 and 240,000 deaths. That depends on which model you're looking at. But whether these grim landmarks will be achieved depends on how fast those states currently carrying on as normal take action. So that's a terrible number. But how many deaths are acceptable? None if it's you or a loved one, right? But we accept death all the time. At least we used to. Let me tell you very quickly about Italy and New York City. Italy is a unique case. First of all, they have one of the oldest populations in Europe, if not the oldest. They're one of the more densely populated. In other words, people live in tightly compacted cities, and their medical care is subpar. They don't have near the level of hospital care that we have, and ventilators and all that. So all of that, and they had a huge number of Chinese nationals living, especially in the hardest hit part of Italy, northern Italy. And this is almost never reported, but it's a fact that on the very day, Wuhan, or however you say it, the Wuhan, the China virus, a couple of plane loads of people from that city flew directly to Italy to avoid that shutdown. That's a fact. And New York City is uniquely, this is why they should have been prepared for this more than any other place probably in the country. They are uniquely, New York City specifically, is uniquely susceptible to this kind of situation because they have international travel, people coming in and out, national travel, people. New York City is a very fluid place, and it's extremely densely populated, the most densely populated place maybe certainly in the United States, but one of the most in the planet. So they were uniquely susceptible. Wyoming, for instance, is not susceptible as much to coronavirus. I'm not saying don't practice your social distance in Wyoming. I'm simply saying that there is a difference, and we're like totally ignoring that. Certainly the media coverage is ignoring much of what I just told you, which is why you need to listen to JMT. All right, we're going to move along. We're going to get right on down here. Yes, we need to test, but let me just tell you, we're going to need to make some decisions as a people. And I've been talking about this, but I'm going to continue to talk about it because there's certain things that just need to be repeated and people need to understand. I'm not even talking about our government. We, the American people, have some decisions to make. And there's two memes that I've been showing you from our forefathers that really sum this up. The first is Ben Franklin. Check it out. People willing to trade freedom for security will receive neither. And that is exactly what we are doing right now. For the fear of our own lives and our loved ones, which is understandable, we are giving away our freedom for that security. And old Ben tells you people who do that aren't going to have either in the long run. The other is another founding father, so to speak, Patrick Henry, the famous "Give me liberty or give me death." Read that quote. I've had it. I'm going to post it again on my Facebook site. But essentially what old Patrick is saying there is that living ain't enough. Just simply existing is not enough. If he can't live as a free human being with all the freedoms that the United States of America is supposed to protect, then he'd rather be dead. So, I'm not saying you want to go and die. That's not what I'm saying. We're all going to die someday, but we have, as a citizenry, we need to make some decisions. Are we willing to trade our freedoms that were so valiantly fought for in blood for personal security? Are we willing to become slaves to a federal government? Are we willing to do that? It's the questions that need to be. All right, we're going to cover this Supreme Court decision right quick. Like Wisconsin is voting today. They have an open primary system, and they are voting today. So in other words, Republican, Democrat, you can vote for either or. Can't vote for both, but you can vote for either or. And their governor was trying to postpone it and shut it down, but it got overturned. So, if you're out there voting, more power to you. Wisconsin State Supreme Court blocked Governor Tony Evers' late executive order postponing in-person voting in Tuesday elections, meaning the state's presidential primary and hundreds of local elections will proceed hours after the governor announced he was postponing them due to corona. So the elections are happening. And is this the right decision or not? Certainly debatable. Is it potentially going to have impact on the nation as a whole? Yes, because the Supreme Court of the United States has already ruled into it. An hour late, the U.S. Supreme Court also ruled in favor of Republicans, they have to point that out, partially blocking a lower court's extension of absentee ballot deadline in the state in a decision that also divided justices ideologically. What they're essentially saying is that they weren't going to extend the absentee balloting out indefinitely, that it had to be postmarked by the end of business essentially today, and they're going to put off the counting the actual election results. So we're not going to get any results tonight, not legally anyway. There'll probably be some leaked exit polling or something like that. Biden's going to win. There's probably little doubt about that. But it does impact us going forward, because the big deal on all this is whether or not the states are going to go to total mail-in voting. And that concerns me, as I've been talking about for a while. And here's the deal. I want to read this part, and then we're going to move on to our last story. While the Supreme Court's ruling, talking about the U.S. Supreme Court's ruling, it was narrow, it still sharply divided the justices. The 5 justices in the majority, all 5 Republican appointees to the court, wrote a detailed, though unsigned, rebuttal to a dissent from Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And here's what her dissent basically said. She said she warned in her ruling that the ruling of the court will result in massive disenfranchisement. Now, keep in mind, people have had the ability to absentee vote for several weeks now. She is saying that this is going to massively disenfranchise people for no fault of their own. And she may have a point there. But here's my question. At what point do citizens of the United States, in this case Wisconsin, the United States, have personal responsibility to vote? And if you can't vote or you feel like it's unsafe to vote, don't you have a personal responsibility to go through the absentee voting process? Another founding father, Thomas Jefferson, talking about ignorant and free, which is one of the reasons why I say this every day. We're battling ignorance and apathy. If a nation expects to be both ignorant and free, they expect what never was and never will be, ladies and gentlemen. You can't be ignorant and free. We have to be informed. You don't have to agree with me. That's not what I'm saying. But you have to understand the voting system as it is and your responsibility to want to vote. So I don't have a problem with us going to absentee voting totally if that has to happen. But in that case, you step up and say, I want a ballot. You request a ballot. It comes to you and you fill it out and you turn it in. The progressives don't like that. This one progressive group, it said progressive groups are scrambling late Monday to determine what legal action, and they weren't successful, if any, they could take in attempt to win an injunction. What is it about progressive voters that they don't think if you're a progressive that you can simply, you don't have the mental capacity to request an absentee ballot? Really? I mean, come on. I don't understand that. They want to mail out votes to everyone, whether they request them or not, so that they can manipulate the system. All right, we've got a couple of minutes left. I want to get into this very, very quickly because you talk about something that could change an election. It's how we take care of our pets. Apparently, this is from the Wall Street Journal. It's a really nice article. I'm running out of time to really cover it, but you check it out. For doctors who care for pets, it's also a trying time. Let me just say that veterinarians are amazing people. and they're loving people more so than about any other group of people I've ever dealt with. I want to show you a picture of my little dog, Lizzie, because I can tell you, we got a picture of my little dog there. We got several, I think. Hopefully we'll get them up. But anyway, what's happening is that a lot of the medical supplies like masks, gloves, even ventilators that some vets use are being taken for human life. And I understand that. Don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying we should, there's my little Lizzie right there. I'm not saying that we should put animal life above human. That's not what I'm saying. But we are amazingly attached to our pets. And if they end up suffering because of this and a lack of preparation, that could probably cost somebody like the president more votes than the amount of human lives. I'm not advocating for that. I'm just telling you the reality of it. And the vets are saying in here, and we'll sum it up with this, they're actually saying that it's breaking their heart because they can't have, most vets are not having human contact. Basically, you're doing curb service with your animal. They're having to put some down because they don't have things like ventilators and stuff like that. And the vets are complaining they don't have human contact to it. And I can tell you, as someone who loves my little old Lizzie, I think I got a second picture maybe we can pop up. My heart goes out to all of you out there who are, you think about sheltering at home without a loving pet. I'm telling you, people who have them actually are benefiting a great deal. Your pet may be tired of being walked every day, but anyway, I just wanted to point that out, that there are all kinds of suffering happening in our country right now, and we have some decisions to make. Well, there she is again. I love my heart. I hate to say it, but man, you hurt my little dog, buddy, and you got a problem. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed the show today as much as I've enjoyed bringing it to you. I appreciate you, our ever-growing audience. Please go directly to John Martin Talks Facebook page, like it and share it with others. As I say, I've been saying every day for the last few weeks, I'll pray for your family, including your pets, and you pray for mine. But above all else, like I say each and every day, from my heart, from my family to yours, have a blessed day.